Why is a hedge maze in The Shining so interesting? From the eerie music to the color contrast, as well as the myths that lie behind, we can admit that this maze has a lot to say but decides not to show. Throughout the first maze scene of Wendy and Danny walking through the maze, we notice that with all the green on the walls of the maze itself, Wendy and Danny have some type of red clothing on. Wendy is wearing a bright red jacket with a red scarf around her neck, and Danny is wearing a flannel-like jacket that has red stripes and a pair of red gloves. The color contrast with everything being green makes you feel more focused on the vibrant red colors on the characters walking through the maze. Red is seen noticeably in the first scenes of the film, like when Jack walks into the hotel lobby for the first time to do his interview. The pillars in the lobby are very red in contrast to the rest of the background. If you really had to think about it, the color red represents the devil. Now onto the camera angles of the maze scenes. I'll leave that up to Hallie to explain all the different types of important camera angles that occur.
Starting off with the most basic and most important camera angle that is always being shown throughout the movie, the first scene of Wendy and Danny walking through the maze is a tracking shot. The tracking shot is happening when you watch Wendy and Danny running towards the entrance of the maze. While this tracking shot is in process, it is always a don't cut, and then the camera pauses onto the map of the maze. Then we move on to another tracking and eye-level shot of the mother and son walking through the maze, and while they are walking through the large confusing maze, the camera then turns 180 degrees to show two characters switching directions to go through a different section of the maze because they both hit a dead end. After a couple of minutes of watching the two characters walking through, the camera then cuts back into the hotel and you watch Jack walk up to a smaller version of the maze that is created on a table. While watching Jack for a couple of seconds, you then see his point of view of the smaller maze sitting on the table. And then the camera starts to zoom in slowly towards the small little people in the center of the maze, which would be Wendy and Danny hitting the center of this massive maze. Then looking further into the film, near the end, when Danny is running away from the psycho axe murderer Jack, running after Danny through this snowy maze. This whole scene consists of eye-level shots as well as a point of view shot of Jack looking at Danny's footprints in the snow, trying to figure out what direction she has to go to find Danny. You will always see Danny's point of view of him while trying to figure out where he has to go to find his way out of the maze before Jack gets to him. During the maze scene, you will hear very scratchy, creepy music in the background while Danny is trying to find his way out of the maze for the sake of his own life. Now I'll let Tawab explain the important details on the music behind the scenes of the maze.
Finally, one of the most important parts throughout the movie and the scenes is the creepy music that you will hear while watching The Shining. This music puts a sense of tension and concern for the characters and the situations that might occur throughout the different scenes. In the first maze scene, where Danny and Wendy are running up to go into the maze, all you can hear is their footsteps on the rocky path. As soon as you see the map near the maze, that's when the eerie music begins. While the two are walking through the maze, the music starts off with the watcher feeling nervous and a sense of mystery is put onto you. Because you don't know how long it might take you to get out of the maze. The music starts to get louder and louder, and a feeling of suspense gets put into place when it cuts to Jack looking down onto the maze on the table. You then start to get worried and start watching Jack looking down onto the maze and seeing Danny and Wendy in the center of the maze. The music that starts to play feels like a dream, while the camera is zooming into the center to Wendy and Danny. All this music is produced by Penderecki's Polymorphia, which is put into the scene to make you feel concerned. It also consists of Uturnja Canon Pashkis. Also, the instruments like a violin, like sounds with eerie chanting voices, perhaps suggestive of the voices of the ghostly patrons of the Overlook. The violin sound help build up suspense, which drops hints that something is wrong with the maze on its own. The music can also put a sense of foreshadow throughout the movie because a lot of different sounds got stronger within what Jack does. An example of that is when Jack bounces the ball in one of the scenes, and with all that aggression that was put into the ball, the music has had a loud drop of eerie noises which gives you a little jump scare.
Now on to some more interesting facts that lie between the lines of the hedge maze in The Shining. One of the most interesting parts about the hedge maze has to be the myth that Kubrick is retelling in the story about the Minotaur. What is the Minotaur? The Minotaur is a Greek myth of a creature with a bull's head and a man's body, who lives in a maze-like labyrinth and is killed by the hero Theseus. The myth contains of this half-man, half-bull who captures his victims and puts them into the maze and chases them through until he catches up and kills them. But soon enough, the Minotaur ends up dead inside the maze while the Theseus gets out. Now we can see the picture that is being drawn by this myth and the maze in The Shining, as Jack Torrance is the Minotaur while Danny is the Theseus. And with that, we all know what a bull's favorite color is. Yes, red. With the information already been said about the color red earlier in the video essay, the color red stands out like the devil's color, and the power of the devil is felt when we are introduced to Danny's imaginary friend Tony. The fact that Tony tells the boy to do things represents an image from the Old Testament of the snake tempting Adam and Eve to eat the forbidden fruit. Another very interesting fact about the hedge maze in The Shining was that throughout the movie, the maze continues to change in pattern. If you don't believe me, then here's what the maze looks like at first when they show it in the map. Then moving a little bit forward into the movie of Jack looking down on the maze on the table, look closely to the pattern of the maze. It shifted and turned into a more complicated one. Let's think once more about what the maze looks like further into the scene when Wendy and Danny are walking through. The maze switches up one last time. Something about the maze switching up in its pattern is so interesting is on the fact that near the end of the movie, when Danny's being chased by Jack, Danny knows his way in and out of the maze because he's already been inside, right? But how does Jack follow Danny's footprints and still not find his way out? That could be because the maze changed its pattern while Jack was struggling his way through, and soon enough, he ends up freezing to death. And that's some information that you may have not even thought about while watching The Shining.